Are you existing or are you living? And if you think it's one and the same thing, you're sorely mistaken. And chances are you've got a lot of self-imposed struggles that you don't realize are self-imposed. Because there's a very big difference between existing and living. And it's not just a theoretical or philosophical difference. Just bear with me and you'll see what I'm saying. There's a logic to life that we've lost because we've tried to be so theoretically accurate and proper about how it is that we define what a good life looks like. We've taken everything and come up with a standard that is supposed to define who is good and who isn't. And that standard is not about morals and values and ethics. It's about how it is that you're supposed to feel about things. Because that's what mental health has done for us. This whole contemporary view of mental health has taken away the human and replaced it with a prescription of what being human is supposed to look like. We're not that. We're much more than that. And that's why it's crazy that we have all of this effort around mental health that in itself is actually destroying our mental health. Because mental health itself is supposed to just be as simple as recognizing our emotional well-being, our groundedness, our ability to be able to experience and express ourselves emotionally in a way that connects with the people around us. And that's the important part. It's with the people around us. It's not with some guru or some influencer from across the world who has absolutely no idea what it is that our reality is about. And then we go and we look for hope and we look for answers and we look for sense in why it is that we're grappling with life in our context. And we take it from sources that have absolutely nothing to do with our context. And that's how we take a very good solution that worked for someone else and we impose it in a context in someone else's life that creates more problems than it actually does solutions. So when did we start existing instead of living? I think we started existing when we looked for comfort in the structures around us, in the boundaries and parameters and the systems that are imposed on a social structure. There's a very big difference between existing and living. When you exist, you're looking to cope with what it is that you have to deal with, what it is that you have in front of you, what it is that you have to accomplish. You try to thrive within that context by coping as efficiently and as stress-free as possible. And that feels like success. It feels like fulfillment. And if it feels like fulfillment, I guess that's what you get from it, and good for you, right? But that's not living. Living is pursuing actively a standard, or rather a quality of life that you see beyond these imposed parameters around you. The roles, the duties, the responsibilities, all of that. That's the bare minimum, literally. If you look at how you need to show up within the context of society and social structures, that is the absolute bare minimum. What you need to do for others because of how much you get from others and things like that. Those are the basic transactions of life that just keeps things functional. And unfortunately, that's the problem, is that most people these days, they strive for having a functional life and the absence of drama, and they think that's a fulfilling existence. It's far from it. And my question is, when did we stop living and start existing? And I think it goes way back, and this is not about childhood trauma. Please, everything these days is about childhood trauma. No, everything is not childhood trauma. And every unpleasant experience of childhood is not traumatic. And you can't reparent the child within you, because that child within you is just a concept that you draw on to make sense of how you feel about life right now. What you have to do is reconcile how you feel right now about life and why, and what you can do about it so you can reclaim your agency. But anyway, I digress. So going back to when did we start existing? You know, I've said it before, and I often repeat it with clients in my coaching, that there is not a single child who was taught how to walk, how to crawl, how to speak. No children were actually taught by their parents how to do that. The most their parents could do was create an opportunity for them to explore and experiment so that they could develop that themselves. And similarly, it's that agency that we're born with, that curiosity and confidence, that is what is lost when we stop living and we start existing. But why do we do that? When did we start doing that? And if I think about it, it's about when we started looking for permission to do things. But I'm not being rebellious here, and I'm not encouraging protest. I'm saying we need to just be aware of how it is that we ask or we wait for permission without realizing that that's what we're doing. Because a lot of people don't achieve a lot of things in their life because they're waiting for permission to do something about it. They're waiting for permission to even pursue it. So as babies, we were laying there on the bed innocently, fidgeting with our fingers and our toes and watching our limbs do strange things. And that curiosity led us to push things and move things and press against the bed or press against the floor. And we saw it actually enabled us to move, to shuffle and to roll over and things like that. And the adults around us thought that was cute. Oh my God, look at them. They're doing this and they're doing that and they're sitting up now and all of that. And they feel accomplished as parents because, look, life goals, milestones, the developmental goals, they're reaching it, and our child is doing well and all of that. So it reflects positively on us as parents. And yeah, whether it reflects positively or not is beside the point. What's more important is what enables that child to do that. And this is where it gets really interesting, because that's why we come with these kind of mainstream views of what healthy development looks like, and we impose it on every single individual. And we don't do this for children. And the detriment to children when we do this is a problem in itself. But we do it with adults as well. We do it with teens and with adolescents and with young adults as well. We do it across the board. We do it to humans. We're always comparing. We're always comparing to say you're supposed to be like this, not like that. But there's merit in that to a point. But that cannot be the be-all and end-all of how it is that we approach each other and how it is that we create space for each other. So that baby that was curious and confident enough to act on that curiosity, that's what led to development. That's what led to exploration, discovery, understanding, and capability that resulted from that. And slowly but surely, the baby didn't have awareness about the people that were laughing or mocking or thinking negatively of it. So that's why it didn't bother about getting things wrong. And then eventually it started trying to walk, and it stumbled, fell on its face a couple of times, and people around it would laugh. Sometimes they would be a bit concerned, but nonetheless it felt supportive. So they would also laugh, or they would cry if they saw the people around them taking it badly or something like that. And that's how babies then mimic or reflect the emotional tones around them. But at some point they became aware of the fact that, hold on, everyone is not always laughing with me. Sometimes they're laughing at me. And that happens so early in life that we don't register when that moment happens. We just feel it. And that becomes the moment at which we slowly stop living curiously and we start existing within the parameters around us, within the structures and the social settings and the expectations that are imposed on us. Because then we're trying to be enough. We're trying to avoid ridicule. We're trying to avoid mockery. We're trying to avoid rejection. We look for validation. We look for assurance. We look for inclusion. And that, relative to the environment in which we grow up, is what defines our sense of self. And depending on how healthy that sense of self is, we'll either strike a balance between existing within the structures that we have to be functional in and living, so pursuing a quality of life, or just existing, because we have no right to pursue anything outside of that structure. Or if we do, we can't count on being supported, or we can't count on people joining us in the journey, because it feels like we are going against the grain, like we're challenging social norms or cultural heritage and things like that. And that's where we lose it even more, is that because of what we get from what we get back from that social structure and from those cultural norms and things, we then become almost custodians, self-appointed custodians and guardians of maintaining it. And then we impose it on the ones around us, because this social harmony that we think is social harmony, we think that is more important than anything else. But the world around it is changing. External to it is changing. It's shifting all the time. And that's shifting all the time becomes a threat to this cultural norm, this cultural kind of bubble that we grow up in. And then we go into defense mode and we feed the victim mindset. And that victim mindset causes endless problems in every sphere of our life. Internally, externally, professionally, personally, you name it. The moment you slip into that victim headspace where you need to be a certain way or else people are not going to accept you, or where you need people to be a certain way or else you don't feel accepted. All of that, that's that victim headspace that causes us to exist, not to live. Because at that point, we become more focused on how we need to be and who we need must be a certain way towards us than we are about owning our ability to influence, impact, and change the reality and the system within which we're operating. And when it comes to life, there's no system that you can start off now and keep it rigidly in place for generations and expect it to still be relevant and effective. All that does is it almost traps you in a time capsule, in a bubble, while everything else around you is moving on, and then eventually you become redundant to the rest of the world. And all you need is for one solitary soul inside that bubble to peer outside that bubble, to see, hey, there's a whole lot of things going on out there. That looks cool. Why can't we have that? And suddenly you have social disruption. And that social disruption feels like irreverence or disrespect for the ways of your elders, in the ways of your forefathers, in the ways of your ancestors. And suddenly you're at odds with life. And then there's generational issues. And then there's disruption, dysfunction, and all sorts of things. And suddenly everyone talks about mental health, about childhood trauma, and about all of these things that's supposed to be so unpleasant and so traumatic for us to contend with, that we need mental health structures and all of that to be able to feel okay about it. You know, if we're so accurate and on point about mental health, then I always ask this question: why is it that we're getting worse at it? Why is it that we're becoming more isolated and more extreme in our ways of trying to make relationships work? Why is it that relationships have become such tough work in the first place? There's very little that just flows with a natural rhythm these days. Everything is deliberate and forced, and within the context of you have to this and you have to that and all of these things. And that's all because we lost sight of the fact that we stopped living curiously and trusting ourselves to do the right thing, or at least to discover what's the right thing to do. And we started relying on social structures and transacting with those social structures so that we can still be included, or we can still feel relevant. And there's this African proverb that I'm always reminded of that goes something to the effect that the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And it's not because the child consciously, deliberately looks at it and thinks, you people didn't treat me nicely, so I'm going to destroy you. No. It's that when we're not treated nicely by the people around us, and I'm saying treated nicely as a euphemism, right? But when we're not treated nicely by the people around us, by the village, then the rage that builds up within us to want to lash out and demand significance and demand that they see us and take us seriously, that's the fire that ravages the village. And if you have enough of the next generation that are not feeling seen and heard and understood by the village doesn't stand a chance of survival. And then it looks like no one respects anything anymore, and no one appreciates the value of life and everything else. Meanwhile, existing is no longer an option. Living is the only thing that makes sense. But there's so few people that actually know how to live these days, that even the ones that are assuming that they are making a go at it, they don't realize they're just trying to thrive within the system. I'm not talking of the matrix and being unplugged in all of that. Those are nice concepts and things, and it's great to have a fun debate about those ideas. But it's not about the matrix. It's not about whether you are living in a virtual reality or you're living in a simulation or whatever it is. It's got nothing to do with any of that. It's about agency and mindfulness relative to what it is that you are capable of influencing and changing, and creating in your life. So coming back to the point about permission, we would look for permission when those structures around us tell us it's okay to try something. You can only do something at a certain age. You can only pursue something when you have a certificate. You can only be interested in something or have participation in something when you have a degree. Or you can only have an opinion on something when you have a certain qualification. That means that you literally are only allowed to regurgitate what is already approved. You're not allowed to think freely. And if you do want to think freely, and if you do want to challenge the norms or present alternate perspectives, it has to be approved of by the ones who define what is acceptable or not. It sounds problematic to me. And that's why we end up with mental health. That's why we end up with all of these labels and all of these boxes and all of these checklists and all of these diagnoses of the human condition without anyone actually understanding the human condition anymore. Because we forgot how to live simply, that we exist in a very complicated way. So, what is it that you're waiting for permission on? Are you waiting for permission to explore something other than a 9-to-5 job? Or it's more like an 8-to-7 job these days, because working from home, you extend your hours without any additional recompensation or compensation for it and things like that. But we're driving ourselves into the ground, and we're trying our best to make the system work more efficiently without taking an honest, cold, hard look at what the system of life looks like, and realizing that this is just doomed for failure because it's unsustainable. We can't look at the human in our partners because we're too focused on what they're not doing for us, or how it is that they're not complying, so we feel disrespected or disregarded. There's no engagement, there's no healthy discussion, there's no meeting of the minds anymore. The meeting of the minds has to be on some sort of construct that is externally defined. My rights and responsibilities and your rights and responsibilities. This is your place and you must know your place, and I must... Yes, there's social hierarchy that is there for a reason, but it's there because there's merit in it. At every level of that hierarchy that you want to honor and obey and respect, there has to be merit at every one of those. It can't just be because of tenure, because of how old you are, because of how long you've been around or occupying a certain role. And I think that's where we went wrong in a big way, is that we started respecting the tokenism of being in a position rather than the merit of the person holding the position. And that's how you end up with clerical structures that can cause more harm than good. And you end up with political structures that are more prone to bribery and corruption and self-serving behavior than public service. And all of those sorts of things, because you're trying to exist within a system that is open to exploitation, but not fulfillment. It's not open to being human. It's open to fitting in. And if you're human, you're not supposed to fit in. You're supposed to complement each other. Strength and weaknesses should become a point of spirited, lively engagement. It shouldn't become a matter of who's right and who's wrong, and then shunning those who don't comply and only welcoming those who do. We've lost the plot. We've lost the plot in a big way. And it's all because we've lost our sense of self. We forgot that when people started laughing at us, it didn't define who we are. It just defined who they are. And that's when we lost it. We started looking for permission after that. And the way we look for permission is every single time we need someone to respond positively. We need someone to respond in a supportive way. We expect someone to align with what it is that we're thinking before we express our thoughts, because we're afraid of mockery and ridicule and all of those things. How empty is that as an existence? And that's why the deathbed regrets are mostly that we didn't try hard enough to let the world know what we were truly capable of. All the opportunities we missed, the ones that we looked at and we stared at for long periods of time, while the fear about what others would think prevented us from exploring those opportunities. We take comfort in predictability because we don't trust ourselves to deal with unpredictable spaces. And then we become controlling, and that controlling nature, people see it as us shutting them down, not as us being afraid of letting them down. We're crazy, aren't we? We've lost the plot. As a village, we don't even function as a village anymore. There are pockets of social cohesion, but for the most part, we don't have a village because the elders have abdicated accountability for their role as elders because they want to retire and be left alone to just enjoy what years they have left in their life, while the problems of life is for everyone else to solve, because that's like, next generation. It's not our problem. Social cohesion is probably the most important aspect of mental health. Yet everything about mental health degrades or dismisses the importance of social cohesion. It encourages this isolationist, self-serving, victimized headspace of, you don't know how difficult I have it, and therefore you must bend over to accommodate me. That's where it gets you to. It doesn't get you to the point of empathy and compassion and understanding, because that requires selflessness. And look at all the mental health paradigms out there, and you'll see, except for the traditional ones that are grounded in social cohesion, in social harmony, except for those, the ones that talk about labels and about diagnosing behavioral traits and developmental milestones and all of that nonsense, those ones drive you towards a self-serving selfishness that everyone is supposed to be able to adopt in their own way, and somehow miraculously we're going to find harmony in that. It doesn't make sense. The logic of life has been lost. And that's why we struggle so much to actually find peace and find harmony and find a natural creative expression and curiosity. So what did you give up in your life? Because you thought, well, nice idea, but it doesn't pay the bills. I've often believed that, and I think in many ways I discovered it firsthand when I decided to leave corporate, that finding your passion in life is the easy part. Monetizing it so that it can pay the bills, that's the difficult part. And that's the part that most people don't want to embrace. They don't want to see how it is that they can add value in a way that someone else will be willing to pay for. Or barter with even. I often think that maybe we should move back to the barter system. It caused us to see each other as humans and as valuable contributors to each other's lives, more than this exchange of fiat currencies and tokens, like crypto. Has absolutely no value except people's sentiment, and we crave to earn more of it. And then someone who has a lot of it decides that they don't like it anymore, and suddenly sentiment changes, and what was valuable yesterday is suddenly worthless today. That's how fickle we've become. That's how whimsical life has become. That we're trying to impress each other, and we're trying to earn kudos and reverence and everything from others, but we don't focus on what's the merit of the value that we are contributing or creating. Everyone wants to be served, but no one wants to serve. Existing is boring as hell. It's boring. Okay, maybe hell is not boring, but just existing, it's so tedious. You wake up every day and you've got a routine set out for you. You wake up every day and you know exactly what it is that's expected of you, and you need to fulfill that before you can have your own life. That's existing. Where's the spontaneity? Where's the passion for creating something amazing? Which comes back to how this affects married life as well. Here's an example of how it is that the system, victim mentality kind of thinking has destroyed the home. Every single time without fail, and this I mean without fail for a long time now, every single time I saw any posts that talks about looking for partners or what they're looking for in partners for marriage, it emphasizes that there has to be stability and a certain level of accomplishment in either party before they are worthy of marriage. So, for example, for men in traditional roles, he must be financially stable, he must have a good job, he must be able to take care of the home in that way and all of those sorts of things. And for the woman, she must know how to cook and clean and or at least run her home and take care of kids and raise them and be a good partner, so to speak. And my question is simply this. Let's assume that all of that criteria is fulfilled from both sides, right? Then what is the purpose of the marriage itself? It's not to develop each other, it's not to grow together, because you're expecting each other to be fully formed and fully grown into their roles before you have hope that this is going to be a marriage that can work. So that's how it is that we raise expectations of someone before we even connect with a human. Now, that's the problem, right? Now, you set out in marriage and you do this, and you look at, okay, he can do that and she can do that, and boom, here we are. We can make a success of this. But you don't realize that their competencies and the independence that they have already before they enter that marriage, that becomes defining for them. And then they want to hold on to that independence. And if you want to be independent in a relationship, don't be in the relationship. Simple. But here we're setting criteria that defines independence. And then we're saying, if you are that independent, now you're ready for marriage. We're stupid. Seriously. We've lost the wisdom of the ages and we've replaced it with this victim mentality. What is the purpose of a relationship if you're not supposed to grow together? If you're not supposed to help each other develop into a unique kind of balance in your roles that is talking to your home, to your life, to your partnership, not something that's imposed because rights and responsibilities and religion says this and culture says that and all of this nonsense. And then when you have problems, you go to marriage counselors who tell you how you must live. It's like a cut and paste. Everyone is expected to have the same kind of life and the same quality of life if only they comply with the rules that the gurus set out. Seriously? This is what happens when you give up your agency, when you give up your sense of self and you outsource it to the people around you and to the systems around you. When you feel like you matter only because you are at a certain social standing, at a certain level in the totem pole of society, or in a certain part of the hierarchy in a corporate setting, then only you feel respected or you feel respectable. That's not what respect looks like. And more importantly, that's not what self-respect looks like. If you need those external points of gratification and those external points of validation and affirmation, if you need that to feel okay about yourself, you don't have self-respect. You don't have a healthy self-esteem. And right there is the problem that we're facing in this world. People with a low self-esteem make themselves available to acts and behaviors that will undermine not only their dignity, but the dignity of others. And that's how you end up with this absolute craziness that we've got parading as international law or as a rules-based code of international relations. It's absolutely ludicrous. Don't worry about that big picture. Look at the puny men and women inside that enable that stupidity. Then take that and reduce it to your world, what's happening around you. And look at how it is that you might be subscribing to the same kind of mentality just on a different scale. But because you can make sense of your context and you can understand why it is that you hold a certain view and have a certain expectation and have certain rights, and that's why you're not obliged to do something more than what you're already doing and all of that. That's how we validate ourselves and how we convince ourselves that it's not our fault, it's their fault. If only you did this, I wouldn't be like this. If only you did that, I wouldn't do this. When are you going to own your life? When are you going to own your contribution towards the circumstances in which you find yourself? Because that's what's lost when we stop and we look for permission. And that permission is a nod or a smile or a nudge or a supporting hand. It's not just a certificate or it's not just a token achievement. We look for permission when we wait to see if someone else agrees with what we believe there's value in. Not self-serving stuff. That's a victim mindset. Because everyone knows this intrinsically. And if you've lost sight of this, it shows how distracted you've become. But we all know intrinsically that the time we feel most fulfilled is when we believe we add value to people who appreciate us. Where's selfishness in that? Where's mental health in that? We need to take things back to a point of sanity, beyond existence, into a point of living again, where we wake up with purpose and we wake up with aspirational goals, not where we wake up with this threat that if we don't meet certain criteria, we're going to become redundant. And then because we exhaust ourselves for 55 years or 65 years of our life fulfilling that criteria or striving to achieve that criteria, that we are then spent and we just want to be left alone after that in our retirement because, we did our tour of duty, now it's our turn to relax. What rubbish. When you retire, you're putting yourself out to pasture because it's like, okay, I've got no more purpose in fulfilling anyone else's rights anymore. Now it's all about me. You've been doing life wrong if that's how you feel when you get to retirement age. And if that's how you get to retirement age, you need to consider that your being dutiful has denied your humanness to the people that you've been dutiful towards. It's sad. We are the architects of our own demise. We are the architects of our own misery. And we're looking for solace in a handbook that is based on absolute garbage that tells you suffer from a mental illness. It's not a legitimate human experience that you're having. Mental health as a term should be abolished and it should be replaced with emotional well-being. That's it. How emotionally grounded do I feel? How emotionally fulfilled do I feel? And why? And understanding that meaningfully. And understanding that emotional well-being is about an exchange of emotional sentiment between two people who mean something to each other. It's not about self-serving pursuits that once you accomplish it, you feel like you are worth something. Because here's the thing, right? If I pursue something that holds the promise of social stature, I get a degree or I get a doctorate or I get some fancy title that people respect and revere. I only feel as if I'm entitled to that kind of respect if I have the title, not because of how I conduct myself within that role. And that's why we have so many charlatans out there who have these titles and are giving absolute rubbish advice. And people are sucking it up and taking it in and adopting it and implementing it and destroying their life and destroying the lives of those around them because they trust the qualification from which it came. Because they've lost critical thinking and they can't even determine whether what this person is saying has merit or not, whether it makes logical sense. And that's the thing. Everything in life has logic behind it. There's no philosophical kind of hocus pocus in the background that you must just trust in blindly. Everything has logic. And just because we haven't connected the dots of that logic doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that we have to still look further before we understand it. And that's what life is about. Curiosity. Seeing how things connect, how they interact, how they impact each other. How it is that something seemingly independent has far-reaching consequences well beyond what you thought it had. And when you start looking at it that way, you'll start realizing that who you are and how you show up has far-reaching consequences far beyond you. It's like a little while ago, we were sitting with some family and we were going through some old mementos, so to speak. And we came across the passport of my great-grandfather. Never met him, never knew him. He passed away in his 30s, early 30s, if I recall correctly. And when we were sitting around the table and we were all having this discussion and we were looking at this as this is our heritage and this is like where we came from and all of that, and his efforts to come from India to South Africa as part of the indentured labours and things like that. And we thought, well, that was the sacrifice that made it possible for us to have the life we've got now. And my thought was, did he realize he was doing that? Was that his motive for doing it? Did he understand how far-reaching the consequences of his actions and his decisions would be? I don't think he did, because he was just struggling to make a life. He was just struggling to have a better quality of life than what he had back home. That's it. And when we lose sight of that long-term impact of who we are and what we're doing, we then stand a higher chance of being reckless and self-serving in what it is that we do because we assume that doesn't affect anyone else. And I'm not referring to my great-grandfather, no. I'm not talking about any personal aspect. I'm talking generally. Just before someone tells me I'm thinking ill of the dead or things, it's not that at all. All I'm saying is that the living, those who are here now, if you are more grounded in the reality of the quality and the merit of what it is that you bring to the table for the people around you or the decisions you're making and what it's intended to serve. If your decisions are primarily intended to serve what you need, your peace, your comfort, your luxury, your entitlement, your privilege, your peace of mind, your feeling of emotional safety, if that's the primary focus of your current existence, then you are very likely harming a lot of people around you while blaming them for treating you badly. Because you don't see how you have impact, and therefore if they respond negatively, it must be because they're bad people, not because you're doing something that's giving them reason to be legitimately upset with you. Everyone's looking to blame someone else for how they feel, and that's the problem with mental health. Trauma this and toxic that. We owe ourselves more than that. We owe the next generations more than that. Because you don't get to opt out of your contribution towards society and then blame society for its decline or its degradation. If you don't like what you see around you, consider what is your contribution towards either sustaining it, maintaining it, or establishing it, or whether you're actually doing something to change it. It starts with you, not philosophically, practically, genuinely. It starts with you. You don't like the quality of your relationships? Look at what you're doing to contribute towards it that's actually enabling that quality that you don't like. And once you've made peace with it, meaningfully made peace with it, once you understand the cause and effect, you connect the dots and you see, okay, I'm not enabling that anymore, but I can see that that person has whatever it is that they're struggling with that's causing them to lose sight of what's important in that situation. And then if you are incapable because of your standing or because of your proximity to that person, you can't influence them to be different about it. That's where you find your peace. Where you know that they're behaving that way because of something that they're contending with, not because of what they think of you. And that changes your posture. It changes the way you show up in that space. And the moment you change the way you show up in a space that has been a certain way for so long, that space changes because you are part of the cycle, and the moment you change what you contribute to the cycle changes. You don't have to wait for others to change how they're doing things or what they bring to the table to change what is going on there. You just have to be aware of how your presence and your contribution might be maintaining what it is that you're complaining about. Be more mindful, be more purposeful about life. Forget this mental health jargon and all that nonsense, and start seeing the human within yourself and the human in the people around you. And then we stand a chance of actually regaining our humanity, rather than just posturing about being kind to each other. Stop existing. Start living. And if you don't know how to do that, just focus on being curious. Because chances are you shut down your curiosity because you're focusing on compliance. Take care.